Luigi Mangione dropped.
Luigi Mangione's name was met with cheers during Weekend Update on SNL. Let me play the clip for you, and then I'm going to discuss.
Luigi Mangione dropped. Yeah, definitely woo. You're wooing for justice, right? Luigi Mangione dropped his extradition fight and was flown from Pennsylvania to New York to face multiple charges. In related news, Bumble exploded.
All right, so as you saw there, the crowd cheered at the mention of Luigi Mangione before Colin Jost could even get to the joke. Before I get to some information here and my thoughts on this, I want to hear from you in the comments. What is your experience with this? And I want to know particularly about people that are not politically engaged. What are their thoughts about Luigi Mangione? Because I feel like this has been a oddly motivating story in the sense that they don't necessarily support, vigilantism, but it's more about the conversation that this has led to, where there has been a real discussion, not just a discussion about healthcare within a Democratic primary, but a real discussion broadly about how disgusting for-profit healthcare is. Again, separate from a Democratic primary. I'm mentioning that because this was a discussion. Medicare for all, for the insanity of for-profit healthcare was a discussion both in 2016 and 2020 while Bernie Sanders was running in the Democratic primary. But it didn't really appear, again, based on the fact that he didn't win those primaries. Democratic primary voter is a specific kind of person. But based on, how those conversations sort of died with those primaries, it isn't a conversation that appeared to really pierce outside of the political news realm. Yet this story has really become a universal discussion about healthcare as opposed to the previous discussion. So I'm just curious to know what people in your life feel about this, how they feel about this, what they think about Luigi Mangione. But before I get to some other stuff, this is the data that I want to share. So Axios here. So I shared this poll in, I think, a few videos ago, but Emerson College polling here, writing, share who say the United Healthcare CEO killing was acceptable or somewhat acceptable by age. And you can really see the differences here in the age. So 18 to 29-year-olds are at 41%. And I want to be clear, that is a plurality because only 40% say it is unacceptable or somewhat unacceptable. And then there's a gap in the middle of people that are neutral, which I don't know how you could be neutral. I'm sure you have a position, but it's possible you don't want to say it into a phone with a pollster. That said, a plurality of people were willing to say that are 18 to 29 that this was acceptable or somewhat acceptable. And as the Washington Post writes about that poll, the poll surveyed more than 1,000 people, showed American adults under 30 are about evenly split on whether they view Mangione favorably or unfavorably. About 1/3 hold each view. Adults aged 30 to 44 leaned only slightly negatively toward him. In contrast, Americans aged 65 plus viewed Mangione unfavorably by about a 15-1 margin. Overall, Americans viewed Mangione more than 2-1 negatively. Younger adults actually viewed Mangione more favorably than the man he allegedly killed, Brian Thompson. When asked how people around them felt, about 4 in 10 adults under the age of 30 said either that most people they know approved of Thompson's killing, 21%, or that they were evenly split, 18%. Just 30% said most people they know disapproved. About as many adults aged 30 to 44 reported that people they know were at least evenly split as reported that most disapproved. And last point on this. In a situation such as this, in which people who might approve of the killing might not want to say that out loud or tell that to the pollster, it can gesture at people's true feelings. So that's why they asked about, people how do they feel? Because a lot of people, they're not going to say into a phone how they really feel about this. But this reaction online sent shockwaves. Especially, I'm seeing a lot of conservative accounts. It should be clear, I guess, just full-on right-wing accounts bring this up and be like, oh my God, I can't believe they cheered about this. These same accounts were supporting a felon for president, and also calling Kyle Rittenhouse a hero who fatally shot two unarmed people. Well, I guess one had a skateboard. So it's just been interesting to see the difference in reaction and also the reaction to their reaction. Because Ben Shapiro, I'm not sure if this is continued, but I know his initial video on Luigi Mangione was drowned out by people, by his own audience, not just people coming in and commenting, his own audience turning on him, disagreeing with him, and basically siding against private health insurance. There's also other accounts I'm seeing that are surprised that what they view as, the left, to them, the left is all the same. Nancy Pelosi and, Bernie Sanders are the same person. Communist is the same person as Joe Biden. Like this clownish idea of what the left means. People that are surprised that the left is revolting against Obamacare, which is not a new thing. A lot of people are not happy with private insurance. There was this idea at the time that the Affordable Care Act could be a stepping stone to something better. That it closed some gaps, but this wasn't going to be the end of it. It was going to be there's going to be a continuation, and they were going to build on top of it, which of course didn't happen. The whole idea was to close the conversation on healthcare, and it really solidified for-profit healthcare as the dominant only form of healthcare in America. And to be clear, as it applies to the vast majority of people, obviously, Medicare, Medicaid still exist, but then again, they have been undermined consistently by both political parties. So there is this attempt here to try and bring this conversation back. Universal healthcare, bring that back into the conversation and make it a real thing. And I don't see this energy dying. Like I'm sure this Luigi Mangione thing at some point will disperse a little bit. But the conversation around healthcare, I think this has woken a lot of people up to realizing that hey, a lot of people agree with them that for-profit healthcare is insane, and that idea is going to continue in the minds of these people that have been activated by this. One last thing. I saw this tweet from Brett, and I think it's worth noting here. So he says, everything about this is so interesting. Like this crowd would never burst into applause to support campus encampments or the rebellions after George Floyd's murder. It's so American. Individual action is heroic. Collective action is uncontrollable, violent, and scary. I do think there is some truth to this. Now, it's hard to know in terms of the applause without a one-to-one comparison here. I have seen applause in vocal support in crowds for Palestinian rights, for example. Depending on the situation, of course. An SNL crowd, I think you could argue, maybe wouldn't be so vocal about that. But there is some truth to Americans are the view of how media operates, of how culture operates. It is very individual, and there is something that can be viewed as uncontrollable, scary about collective action. That said, we have seen the media reaction to all of these things, and they are all negative toward them. So there is, I think, a universal reaction from those that have power and have money, that have a very specific view about people needing to stay in line, that is separate from a crowd's reaction. But it's interesting nonetheless. And of course, let's not downplay the fact that Luigi Mangione is good looking. I'm sure that played some part in the cheers as well. But I'd like to know your thoughts on all this below the video.